Hi, in this video we will configure a Windows 2008 active passive failover cluster. This video is one of the videos of multiple videos wherein we will install MS SQL database cluster. As far as prerequisites are concerned, all cluster nodes should have identical hardware, identical operating system. As far as storage is concerned, there should be a shared storage which will be accessible by all the nodes. As far as network is concerned, the cluster node should have a dedicated heartbeat network adapter. It is not mandatory that every cluster node should have a dedicated heartbeat adapter, but it is always recommended to have a separate dedicated heartbeat adapter because the cluster communication happens through heartbeat network and it generates a lot of traffic. As far as CNO and VCO are concerned, they are basically normal computer accounts in Active Directory. The user who is creating the cluster should have full rights on CNO, and CNO computer account should have full rights on VCO. All the cluster nodes should be part of the domain. So let's start cluster configuration. So here is my setup. Here I have a domain controller, node 1 and node 2. So my domain controller will also act as my storage server, wherein I will be using iSCSI LUN, which will be presented from domain controller to both the nodes, node 1 and node 2. So let's check the networking. So here I have 3 networks, one for heartbeat, one for iSCSI communication, and the other one is production network. So I have similar network configuration in both the nodes. Heartbeat, iSCSI and production. So to start with, first we will create a user that will be used to create the cluster. So this is my user which will be used to configure the cluster. This is an ordinary domain user. It is not member of any special group like domain admin or enterprise admin, etc. It's a normal user. So let's log in with this user on both nodes. First, before that, what we will do is we will add this particular user to local admin group of both the nodes. Okay, so the user is added to admin group on both the nodes. So now let's log in with the user. Okay, so now we will install cluster. So basically we will go into features under server manager and select failover clustering on both the nodes. Features, add features, failover clustering, install. Okay, it is installed on node 1. Okay, so failover cluster feature is installed on both the nodes. Now let's configure iSCSI learn on both the nodes. Okay, so this is my iSCSI initiator. From this iSCSI initiator, I'll try to connect to my iSCSI server. That's my domain controller. So that's the IP address of iSCSI NIC card. So it got connected. Let's do it on node 2. Okay, both are connected. Now let's go to disk management. So this is the 2 GB iSCSI LUN that's been provided from the storage side. That's in this case domain controller, which is also acting as storage server. So we will be using this particular 2 GB LUN as the witness disk. Okay, let's format the partition. We will set the drive letter to Q. That's it, and we will do the same thing on node 2. So let's take it offline. Okay, disk management. Okay, here it is. I'll take it online. Oops. Okay, so we'll change the drive letter, and on node 2 also we'll set it to Q. So that's it, we are done. Now we will start the cluster configuration. I'll go on node 1 and I'll open Failover cluster management console. So this is how it looks. The GUI may differ based on the operating system. So I'll right click here and say create a cluster. Next I'll add both the nodes. Okay, nodes are added. Next. Okay, now here we have two options. Either we can run all the tests or we can select individual test. So here I'll select run all test options. Next. Okay, so what it is doing right now is it is checking all those parameters, whether it is complying with all the requirements. So right now what it is doing is it is trying to take the shared storage online and offline. See, you can see the quorum disk coming online and going offline. Same thing it will be doing on node 2 as well. It will try to bring online the shared storage on all the cluster nodes. So here also it will appear. Here it is. So it is trying to bring online the witness disk on both the nodes. Validate simultaneous failover, bringing on disk 0. So this will take some time. Let's wait for this to complete. Okay, validation is done. Let's see the report. Okay, so oops, so open it again. Okay, so as far as inventory we are good, network we are good, storage we are good. As far as system configuration is concerned, it says active directory configuration. Let's see what does it say. So what it says is user running validate does not have permission to create computer object. So basically the user that we are using is a normal domain account. It just has admin rights on individual cluster nodes. It doesn't have any rights on active directory, but that's okay. That's not a problem. So we will proceed. Now here we need to give a cluster name. So this cluster name will be represented by CNO in Active Directory. So let's give some name. So what will we do is we will create a computer account that is CNO in Active Directory with the same name. computer okay, but here now we won't give any permission to this particular cluster account. Sorry, this is to show you how important the permissions are. So if I go to properties and check permissions, so it for everyone this just have basic read-only permissions. It doesn't have much permissions for any authenticated users, read only. So that's the only permissions that it has. We haven't added our cluster configuration user here, and we haven't given any permission. So what we will do is we will disable this account. So basically this particular thing is called as pre-provisioning of computer accounts. So we have created the computer account, but we haven't assigned permissions to the user. So right now it is going to fail, but still let's see. I'll give IP say 192.168.80.50. Next. Next. So as expected it failed. Let's see the report. So it says access denied. It doesn't have any access. So we will again go to the domain controller, properties, and we will assign full permission. Okay, we have added CLU-ADM account and we have given full permissions to this account. Now let's try to create the cluster again. So again I'll go to create cluster, next add servers, next okay, we have given the cluster name and the IP address, next okay. So now if you can see the cluster has successfully been formed. So if we scroll down here we can see the cluster resources here. So now my cluster 1, that's the name of the cluster, and IP address of that cluster 80.50. we have the witness disk over here. Now let's go to Active Directory. Now if I refresh, the account is now enabled. So this is how the cluster is formed. Now what we will do is we will configure a cluster instance here. So for this I'll do one thing. I'll just create a blank group, empty service or application. Okay, so we can rename it the way we want. Okay, so in this blank group we will add our cluster resources. So let's see, add resource, let's add client access point. Now I'm giving the name as instance-1. So this will be represented by VCO in Active Directory. So let's give it IP address. So let's give it 60, 192.168.80.60. Next. Next. Okay, it has successfully been configured. Now let's bring it online. Okay, so our instance is online. At least the access point is online. So this is the virtual name and this is the virtual IP of this instance. So now if I go to Active Directory and again refresh it, the instance 1 is configured here and it says Failover cluster virtual network name. So this is basically the VCO, virtual cluster object. Now if I go to properties and check the permissions, this CNO my cluster 1 has modify rights on VCO, that is instance 1. So this is our CNO and this is our VCO. So CNO has or the user creating the CNO has full rights on CNO and CNO has full rights or modify rights on VCO. So again, if I go to properties and check security, our CLUIDM we have given full rights on CNO. So let's fail over the cluster, move to node 1. So it has taken it on offline on node 2 and now it is bringing it on node 1. So this is how the clustering works. So as far as configuring the witness disk is concerned, I'll go to the cluster, the basic cluster where we have the cluster instance and the quorum disk or witness disk. Go to more option and select cluster quorum settings. Now there are multiple types of quorums: node majority, node and disk majority. That's the standard active passive failover cluster option. Then node and file share, wherein the file share on some third server or NAS box is used as a witness. And node majority, it is the old Windows 2000 or 2003 style cluster. So here right now we have only one disk that is Q. If we have multiple disks, then we can just uncheck this and check the other available disk and make that disk as witness disk, and that's it. So this is how the cluster works. These are the basics of cluster. Thanks for watching. The other links of other videos like installing and configuring MS SQL cluster, I'll share it in description. Thanks for watching the video.